Okay, everyone, let's talk about workplace and organizational communication. First, workplace communication is communication exchange occurs between people within a workplace aimed at accomplishing workplace objectives. So, just because you're having a conversation at work doesn't necessarily make it workplace communication, right? It has to do with the conversation that is promoting the workplace goals. So if your workplace goal has to do with a meeting that you're attending, or you're trying to increase sales numbers, or you are trying to fix a piece of equipment, or you are trying to assign a task or delegate a role, those things are workplace communication. You guys hanging out and trying to figure out who's going to win the election, not workplace communication. It happens at the workplace, but that does not necessarily make it workplace communication. Now, organizational communication is the process through which workplace members develop, maintain, and modify workplace practices. So this is actually taking a step back and trying to observe, how do things actually get done in this organization? What is the chain of command? How do people try to move their way up in this system? How do people try to get a project approved? How do people get hired or fired? Um, how do people find out if they're doing a good job? Things like that. That has to do with the process involved, not necessarily the communication itself, but the process that people take to get things accomplished. Now, this is really important. Communication networks. These are the formal and informal patterns of communication that link members together. So formal, this has to do with things that are prescribed and sanctioned by the workplace. So downward would mean, so if you have the boss who's up here, and then the boss actually sends information down the line, right? That's the downward communication. That would be the boss sending out a notice that they're hiring, or the boss standing up and giving an end of the year speech. These were our goals. This is what we met. This is what we should increase for next year. That kind of thing. So this has to do with the boss sending information down the line. Upward communication that's formal has to do with somebody at the bottom sending information up the line. So this would be somebody sending a note to corporate that somebody over here is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? They're sending it through official channels. Horizontal is where I'm sending something to another adjunct instructor, right? We're both on the same level. So if I decided to send a note to HR and say that I was being sexually harassed, that would be upward, because it would be from me to somebody up in the organization. But if it was horizontal, that would be me addressing something to a colleague. So I don't know if that makes sense. Now, informal is social interaction between coworkers. So these emerge from organizational activities. All of this might sound like wah, 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 but this is actually how things are handled in the workplace. These things matter. Nike actually had a huge, huge issue. I don't know, back in 2017, maybe, because leading up to that, there was so much sexual harassment going on in the upper levels of Nike corporate, and all the women knew it. In order to get ahead, in order to, I don't know, get to the CEO levels, people would do informal things, like they would have meetings at strip clubs. And so, of course, they wouldn't invite the women. They would, some of the CEOs would refer to what the women were wearing in emails. They would refer to specific body parts. They would talk about women in sexual ways to the women, and then about the women behind their back. And these women actually took the formal process upward, right? And they addressed it to human resources. And human resources addressed it to the CEOs, but the CEOs were the ones doing it. So it didn't go anywhere. And then finally, one of the women, she jumped the chain of command and went straight to the owner and said, "You need to fix this structure. If you do not fix this structure, women will walk. We are not putting up with this. We're not tolerating the way that we are being treated in this company, and the way we are being talked to and about in this company, and the way we are being held back." And I mean, the owner, to his credit, had no idea it was happening. I don't know whether he did or didn't, but fired the CEOs. Just clean slate, got rid of people, because she skipped over the top of the people that were keeping the information back, from being more upward, and he took care of it. So these ways of communicating matter, because obviously if you think you're moving the information up the hierarchy and it's only going so far, that's a problem. And then the informal ways of gathering, if you're trying to get ahead and the only place that you can get ahead is if you are hanging out with your coworkers at informal gatherings, and the informal gatherings are at men's clubs, are at whites only places, are at places that are restrictive to certain types of people, there's no way for people to get ahead. So communication in an organization matters. It matters to the way that people progress in a company. It matters why people would get out of a company. All of these things play a huge role. Now, these are the different channels, right? We have face-to-face communication. So small groups, training sessions, we have even interaction with customers. We have interaction with each other when we're actually in a workplace. Written, we have letters, memos, emails. Once we get down to mediated emails, they are written, right? We can print them out and prove that somebody has written something, which, by the way, sinks a lot of people when you're talking about things like sexual harassment. Mediated, so we have cell phones, the internet, and then mass communication. We have newsletters. We have even blog posts. We have things that are put out on mass media in terms of Twitter accounts and just all kinds of forums like that. So the communication climate, relative acceptance or rejection perceived by workers based on relationships established in the workplace. So once again, you can have a supportive environment or a defensive environment. The supportive environment, the worker contributions are welcome and valued. The defensive one, worker contributions are neither welcomed nor valued. So you could be in a situation where people are like, look, I know that I am at work and I have a job because I value the people who work for me and with me. And when that happens, you value their input. When somebody says, I don't think this is the right direction we should be going, this concerns me over here, what about this? As a boss or even as a supervisor, you would listen to it. And even if you don't agree with it, you'd take it in and you'd say, thank you for your input. I'm going to process that. But if you think, I got this job, I do what I want. And these people, they work for me. If they don't like it, they go get another job. That's a defensive workplace because you don't really care about the people. You care about yourself. And so if they want that job, they'll do what you say. And so it's an adversarial kind of relationship. And so you are defensive. If somebody questions you, you're like, well, I don't know why they think they can make a better decision than I can. And so it creates this us versus them mentality between you and other workers, which kind of turns toxic. And that leads us into workplace culture. So these are the knowledge, beliefs, and values and behaviors and practices that influence how members think and act. If you watch any workplace TV show, any TV show, The Office, Grey's Anatomy, I've been watching this really weird show on Prime called Goliath. Like, there's just some strange, like, really interesting TV shows out there. But watch any office place TV show, and what do you find? You find people who want to work together and to form alliances and who get along really well and support a culture. And then you find people who are, I will throw you under the bus and I will take your job and I will screw you over because I will get what I want. That is a workplace culture. And in some respects, a boss determines that culture. A boss can determine that culture by pitting people against each other and saying, well, one of you is going to have a job at the end of this 6 months. Depending on your sales numbers, who's it going to be? Well, you're not going to make friends with this person because only one of you is going to have a job. And if you have a family to support, all of a sudden you've got a really cutthroat situation and you're not going to make friends with this person that you're trying to steal the job from. Right? So that's a workplace culture and it's a defensive environment. And so the values and the behaviors that they are putting into this workplace, what are they? They are look out for yourself. You don't look out for the business, you look out for you. Right? And so all of those kind of things work their way into the culture, as opposed to if you have a boss who says, I don't care what the customer says, I have your back. You do what you're supposed to do. You provide excellent customer service and I will always have your back. That's what Southwest Airlines was based off of from the get-go. And for years, people clamored to work at Southwest. Why? Because they could be ridiculous and they could be funny and they could be all kinds of things as long as they stood for good customer service. Because at the end of the day, people knew they were going to have crazy customers. They knew people were going to complain because people do that. But they knew that Southwest had their back. And so they knew that at the end of the day, no matter what happened, Southwest would believe them over the customer. And so they did their best, but they didn't live in fear that they were going to lose their job. And Southwest proved it over and over again. Every time they would get complaints from customers, they would say, "I'm so sorry that you had a bad flight with us. Please consider flying with someone else next time. I'm sure you would appreciate them more." Like, how many people support their employees like that? They don't, which is why people would clamor to work there. The workplace culture was, I care about my employees so much that I will back them. And if you're going to be a crazy customer, we have enjoyed you, but somebody else can enjoy you now. Wouldn't you love that? Right? So the value and the behavior is, we want you to work here. We value who you are. We value your time. So we will not only pay you for it, but we will treat you like a human. I mean, that's beautiful. And then they lived it out and they backed it up. Now, do they still do that? I don't know. I think they've changed management and leadership. So I don't know that it still holds that same value, but it did for a really long time. So communication practices in the workplace. This is where we have artifacts. These are the visible or tangible things that represent all of those cultural values, right, that we just talked about. So we have symbolic things like pictures on the wall. We have role things. For instance, Illinois State recently put a position together for diversity and equity in education. I think they created like a dean of diversity and equity. Nobody really knew what this person was going to do. I don't know what their assigned tasks were, but there was a role task that was assigned, and that person's assignment was to have something to do with settling the problems that had arisen with the lack of equality on campus in the way that things were handled. That is a role element, and the goal of that was to say our culture is not being equitable with the way that we decide things on campus. People feel a racial unrest, and we need to address it. So they did that by creating a role. There are interactive elements, there are contextual elements. All of these things give a face to the culture itself. And so the espoused beliefs and values, these are the strategies or the goals or the philosophies that guide the work or the behavior. So all of these things actually put a face to and a strategy behind what we say the culture is that we want to have. So it's one thing to say that I want there to be equity and that I want people of all races and creeds and religions and backgrounds to have the same opportunities. It's another thing to actually put in place things that would make that happen. And so that's what all of these artifacts and beliefs and values and strategies go toward. Now, communication practices, there are underlying assumptions that are at play in every workplace, and we don't understand these. They're totally taken for granted, these perceptions, feelings about yourself, about your coworkers, about how you work, about what hard work looks like, all of these impressions, right? They differ between cultures, they differ between people, and we don't understand them until they've been violated. It's just the way we roll. We assume that everyone else considers hard work to look exactly like what we think hard work looks like. And then all of a sudden, it's completely violated. Somebody takes off early in the middle of the day. And we go, what the crap? I work 8 to 10 hours a day. Why aren't they working 8 to 10 hours a day? But we don't understand what they're doing. The way that they're working actually is working. It just doesn't look like the work that we do, right? We think that people who are, I don't know, answering phones 8 to 10 hours a day are not doing hard work. We do hard work because we do manual labor, or we do hard work because we do mental labor like reading reports all day, or brain surgeons, or we rank things in a hierarchy, right? And so whatever our job is, we perceive to be the most difficult, and we look at other people's jobs and go, that is not that hard. They get to go play golf half the day, or they get to go do this half the day. And we don't understand necessarily the complexities of what everybody else's job entails, right? So we have perceptions about them, and we take for granted some of the things that they do. We just don't see how hard their work actually is, whatever their work is. So um, keep all of this in mind when you're thinking about workplaces, because it's very easy to judge from the outside and say that person just answers phones 10 hours a day. If I had to answer phone 10 hours a day, I would lose my freaking mind. So it looks easy, and you might get to sit in the same place with a headset on. There's a lot of emotional strain to listening to people yap in your ear for 10 hours a day. Like, I don't have the emotional stamina for that. No, thank you. I would lose my mind and probably say something not nice. There are different people cut out for different kinds of work. So we know that these are taken for granted when we violate them and we say careless things like, must be nice to have that kind of job, right? And we're not processing the way people actually work and what they actually do. So these are the processes by which you learn these values and norms in the workplace. Um, so the anticipatory stage is when you first get into a workplace and you're looking around and you're figuring out how everyone does everything. You're looking at all the possibilities. The assimilation stage is where you start to do things and people in the office go, oh, no, we don't do it like that. We do it like this, right? And they kind of usher you in and kind of get you to do things a certain way. And then the exit stage is when you leave the workplace. So this is how we seek information. We acquire feedback. We monitor how we're doing. So some of it is overt. We go to someone and say, what do you think? Most of us are not that ballsy, to be honest, because we don't really want to know what people think. There's the indirect path, right, where we say, well, there's this thing going on over here. Have you thought about that lately? But we don't have any direct questions to people. We just kind of give them a passive question and see if they will tell us what they really think. Then there's the third party. We bring somebody else in and we say, so and so's over there doing that. What do you think about that? And we ask the third party to cooperate with whatever our assumptions are. My husband just walked in. And then there's the testing, right, where we're trying to find actual numerical feedback. The observing. Now my dog's getting grunty. There's all kinds of crazy things happening right now. Then there's the observing. This is when we actually observe what is taking place in the situation and try to get feedback from that. Disguising conversations. This is another word for gossip. Trying to figure out, I heard so-and-so say this, and so-and-so said this. When really nobody's saying anything, you're just trying to figure out what people really think. And then there's surveillance. This is you just creeping about trying to figure nonsense out. Obviously, the best way to do any of this is the overt. Ask somebody what they're thinking. Seek legitimate information. Ask clear questions. Gain a better perspective. The best way to do that is to be honest and open. And I think, obviously, we can go into the peer relationships and we can go into relationships at work and romantic relationships at work. But let's end on workplace dissent. The biggest idea with workplace dissent is it is necessary. It is so necessary to be able to disagree with someone. Whether it's upward dissent when you disagree with your boss, it is necessary for you to disagree with your boss sometimes. It should not be one of those, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. This is the worst thing ever. I can't tell anybody. I can't tell my boss. This is awful. If you are ever the boss, you need people to disagree with you. We all need people to disagree with us, because if we cannot gain a broader perspective of what's going on, we can't see our blind spots, right? So if you disagree with someone, you need to be able to state that, but state it respectfully, not like you're losing your mind. You freaking idiot. You can't blah, blah, blah. But to be able to go to someone respectfully and say, I don't agree with this new initiative. Can we discuss what is happening with that? That is a good thing. Latent dissent, where you share concerns aggressively with your coworkers. This is a bad idea all the way around. The positive thing is to go to your boss and say, I have concerns. The bad idea is to go to your coworkers and say, They screwed us over again. I don't know why we bother with this. We should go get a job elsewhere. Blah, blah, blah. Like, this doesn't help anybody, right? You saying nasty things that just incite further aggression with the coworkers and angst with the coworkers, this doesn't help anyone. And then there's displaced dissent. That's where you share concerns with people outside of the workplace. This is where you just come home and rant to your significant other about what everybody did at work. This does not solve any problems whatsoever, right? This is just you unloading. Now, you might feel a little bit better because you got to unload, but that person can't help you. The only way you can actually get things addressed is to address them to the person at work who can help fix them. So I think we can see where this is all going. Grown-ups need to address their problems to the people who can actually help fix them. Now, having said all of this, workplaces are messy because human beings are messy. And is this easy? Heck no, it's not easy. But if we keep asking questions and we keep our calm and we try to keep having open lines of communication, we can work this nonsense out. And sometimes it might get ugly. It might, because we're humans. But more often than not, people will respect your ability to keep a calm head and to press in respectful ways and ask good questions. So there you go, chapter 9, all wrapped up.